it's Tanya, and today I'm joined by the wonderful pup Willow. And she likes the window open, so we're gonna leave it open for her today, aren't we? See, that's good. I also have my iPad because I took notes for today's video because it's a topic that is near and dear to my heart. I just don't want to miss anything that's important or kind of stay on track as well so I don't sound like a crazy person. But a couple of people have asked me now to make a video on what PTSD looks like for me, because when I think of PTSD, I think of a veteran, somebody that's been in active military, seen combat, and has lived through it. I don't think of someone like me. So today I wanted to cover what it looks like for me. To be fair, a lot of veterans do have PTSD from their combat experiences, but that's not the reality for everybody. Some people have experiences with PTSD that haven't been in those scenarios. So let's start off with what is PTSD? What is the definition of that? And I'm not a therapist, so if you're looking for qualified individuals, make sure you seek those people. I'm just talking about my scenario and what PTSD is for me, as well as what I found in regards to the DSM-V, and we'll get into what that is a little bit later. To me, PTSD is someone that has experienced some kind of trauma that's made them feel like their life was in danger or at risk, or that has led them to approach life in a different way because of a situation or event. Because of that event, they can't move on and they're kind of stuck in that situation in some way. They can't move on because of maybe nightmares they're having, situations that trigger them, maybe avoiding locations that remind them of the scenario. I think sometimes people don't even realize when they're triggered that it's even relating back to their trauma. When I talk about people avoiding certain things that trigger them, a lot of times that has to do with different smells or sounds. Those tend to be a lot of people's triggers, or just memories in general. She has moved and we are happy. So this might also lead them to having changes in their mood, changes in their thinking or behavior that might seem different to them or different to other people, that might not fully make sense. Now, when I'm talking about mental health, I do want to give a warning, a caveat, if you will, about self-diagnosing. I don't want you to go and Google and kind of self-diagnose yourself with a diagnosis. It's really important to seek a professional like a therapist, somebody that's a licensed clinician that has been trained on how to diagnose people. They usually use a resource called the DSM-V, and that has certain diagnosing criteria that helps them diagnose somebody, obviously. So they know what helps qualify you within that, and they have certain ways of knowing how to do that. The DSM-V is published by a reputable location. I believe I wrote it down, the American Psychiatric Association, so those people know what they're talking about. So we want to focus on those people and not let other people that are not licensed clinicians diagnose us. I just wanted to give a heads up that PTSD is something that you qualify for. So you hit certain diagnosis criteria to be diagnosed with PTSD. So that means that you can actually work yourself out of a diagnosis. So that's kind of the same with a lot of diagnoses, not all of them. You can reduce your symptoms to the point where you don't qualify for them. So that's kind of my goal, is to work myself out of the diagnosis of PTSD. And that's kind of the goal of therapists, or it should be. They're working themselves out of a job. You don't want to have to see a therapist forever, but I think they're a good resource that everyone should have if that's something that they like. So hopefully that kind of helps you understand what PTSD is. So let's move on. Anyways, what does PTSD look like in an average day life? What does living with PTSD look like? And I'm not going to do a deep dive of every single thing, but maybe things that might help you if you do have PTSD. So the first thing that was important to me when dealing with PTSD was figuring out what my triggers were. So what things affect me that will change my day or the course of my day. What is going to be my trauma response with these triggers? So again, I took notes, so I'm going to look down through the video so it makes me feel more comfortable while I'm recording because I'm new to this. So the first thing is I haven't figured out all my triggers. So I don't know that you can fully know all your triggers. I think sometimes they're just deep down in the back of your brain, but it's kind of hard to figure them out at times, and that's okay. We can figure things out as we go. My symptoms seem like they randomly occur at times, but generally there is a trigger deep down that I'm just not noticing, or maybe that I can look back at later and be like, oh, that's the trigger. So what are my triggers? One of them is smells. So there's this smell that smells like a mixture of plastic, cleaning supplies, and flowers. Generally that comes up at random locations, but I know that goes back to anesthesia. I used to wear a mask during some of my surgeries, and that smell is triggering to me. So if I'm out and about at a grocery store, it's a cleaning supply that sometimes people use, or I've been at a bank and it happened where I smell the smell and it triggers me. So I have this trauma response where my heart starts beating, I start kind of freaking out. I've had to leave stores because of it, or that bank situation. I've had a meltdown and had to leave, and I have never been back to that bank because of it, now that I think about it actually. But that's one of my big triggers, is a smell. Another trigger that I've noticed is about 2 times a year I have a meltdown about my adoption. So it seems to come on randomly, but I think that I've noticed it comes around holiday season when I'm with family. I think I realized that I'm missing out on one family that I could have had a relationship with, and so it gets me in my feelings, if you will, and it makes me sad. And I don't think that I always have it at holiday seasons, but I think it tends to be around those times. Sometimes I wonder if there are certain conversations that I have with people that trigger me, because I feel like sometimes they just feel so random that I can't quite pinpoint where they're coming from. But that's something I'm still trying to figure out, is what are all of my triggers. And I think it's kind of a lifelong journey, is trying to figure those out. So what are the symptoms of PTSD? I'm not giving you specific criteria that qualify you for PTSD. I'm just talking about my experiences, things that I've noticed within my PTSD. So the first thing is anxiety. And I am not talking about clinical anxiety. I don't have that as a diagnosis. I'm not trying to minimize people that have anxiety. Certain things just kind of sit within the PTSD diagnosis and they come up, but I'm not diagnosed with anxiety. And I know that can be confusing, but anxiety can show itself in PTSD. So I don't know if that makes sense. But anyway, with the anxiety, I would say the main things that I notice is my heart rate increases. Sometimes I start sweating or I start shaking. I start feeling very restless, like I can't sit still. Sometimes it leads to a panic attack, which those can be really scary. My anxiety attacks are a little bit intense and I don't get them very often, but I work myself into an asthma attack at times, and that's pretty scary. Asthma attacks are scary within themselves. So having that at the same time as a panic attack can be super overwhelming. So the next symptom I've noticed is hypervigilance, which means I'm very aware of everything that's going on around me. Well, maybe not everything, but I can tell you how many people are around me, which person looks creepy, that kind of thing. And so it kind of turns into paranoid thinking for me, because I feel like I'm in danger, even though there's nothing to prove that I am. I just start to feel this, again, heart rate increasing. I'm wary of people, and I'm wary of new people in those scenarios. I often think that people are following me, and I go to great extents to make sure that they're not when I'm driving. For instance, I will drive in the opposite direction of my home just to make sure that somebody isn't following me, and I'll take back roads. Those days are really inconvenient and very uncomfortable. Willow distracted me, but it's also a huge waste of gas money. Can you imagine just like driving around the block multiple times? I mean, that isn't great. I also feel very restless and I can't shake it, kind of like the anxiety. It gets to the point where sometimes I even feel like I'm gonna die. And I mean, that's one of the major things of PTSD, is that kind of overwhelming feeling of dread kind of thing. The next symptom is isolation. Start to isolate myself from everyone. I don't want to share how I'm doing or how I'm feeling. I avoid making plans with people, and that's really unhealthy because that's the times that I really need to be with people. The next symptom is avoidance, and this is different than isolation, so hear me out. This is avoiding certain smells, certain memories that remind me of an event, or different locations that remind me of an event. It also comes with avoiding life completely, mainly for me through imagination. So I completely take myself out of a situation. My brain doesn't want to think about something, so it creates a story. They usually have to do with something fantasy-wise that completely takes me away from my current reality. So if you think of reading a fantasy book or getting away from something, that's what I'm doing in my head. Sometimes it gets really bad and it kind of starts to control my life, and it makes, working hard mainly takes over my drive time. Anytime that I am alone with my thoughts, it starts to take over. The next symptom is feeling nothing at all, like numbness, feeling completely numb. So this is when my brain completely shuts down. All of my emotions are shut down and I feel nothing. It's usually pretty strong and I've had a hard time turning it off. My brain doesn't like emotion, and that's kind of my version of PTSD, is blocking out emotions completely. That's something I've been working through for quite a while with my therapist. I have a really great one. But my brain doesn't like to do emotion because it feels like emotion is going to hurt me. And in reality, we know emotions are good. We know that they help us get through lots of situations. If you've seen, that Disney movie with all the feelings, Inside Out, we have learned emotions are good for us, but my brain likes to think that they're not. Even though I know emotions are good, I can't get that through to my brain. It needs to figure it out already. The next symptom is brain fog. That's, pretty self-explanatory. Mostly comes with the feeling nothing at all, and the avoidance. I just kind of get a brain fog and I don't want to really think about anything. The next one is getting stuck in depressional states. Again, I'm not talking about clinical depression. I don't have that. I get stuck in funks within my PTSD diagnosis, and I don't want to minimize depression and what people go through. I, again, don't have that diagnosis. I am talking about getting stuck in a funk and not being able to get out of it for quite a while. But usually it goes away for me. It's not like clinical depression that people struggle with it every single moment of every single day. Again, I don't have depression, so I don't know exactly how that works for people. But it's hard for me on those depressional funk stretches to get through daily activities, kind of like what you hear with depression. I don't want to do a lot of the hobbies that I love. I don't want to do things that would generally bring me happiness or what I would normally do. And I have constant negative thoughts about life, myself, and the world around me. The next symptom is bad dreams that lead to insomnia. So I start by having really bad nightmares for a time about things that have either happened or things that correlate with traumas that I have had that aren't exactly it, but I can tie back to it, or my therapist usually can tie back to it. Sometimes they're nightmares I can't connect things to, or maybe my therapist can't as well. I do get the occasional nightmare that is a nightmare that happens, and then I have that nightmare repeatedly, or I have nightmares that work off of each other. So I'll have one nightmare one night, and then the next night it kind of builds off of that last dream, and so it just like keeps building for like a week or so, and so it just kind of gets worse and worse, or I'm stuck in the same scenario in the next nightmare. Normally this makes me feel exhausted because I'm waking up throughout the night, and I sometimes will have the nightmares over and over throughout the night. So I'm waking up multiple times a night, and that usually happens for a period of time. So I just get completely exhausted, and it's really frustrating and demoralizing when you're stuck in these nightmare states. I'm now on sleeping pills. I've had to kind of figure out which ones work for me, which actually the hardcore sleeping pills don't work for me, which sounds really funky. I'm on one that's not even made to be a sleeping pill, but hey, it works for me. Obviously, another symptom would be bad memories. That one's obvious. Blocking out memories, that's pretty obvious. The next one would be blaming myself for situations. So generally these are situations that weren't in my control or aren't in my control. For example, blaming myself for my adoption. So I gross and they didn't want me. So if you saw one of my last videos, the scar, I had the hairy nevus, so that could be disgusting to some people. Or I wasn't good enough, or I wasn't worth enough to make my mom stop taking drugs. I just wasn't worthy, even though I know that's not my fault. That's something on a normal day I can talk myself through and be like, psh, that's my mom's thing, not mine. My bio mom had these situations and it's not my fault. But on a bad day, I can't talk myself out of it. It's something that is nagging in the back of my head, and no matter what I tell myself, no matter how black and white thinking, or how much I know that it's not true, I can't get it through my brain on these bad days. And whatever it is my fault, and there's nothing you can do or tell me to make me believe that it's not. So that's really hard in those times. The next symptom is actually really scary for me, and it's disassociation. I've talked with people about this, or I've seen things that people post online about disassociation, and it's not the same for me as I've seen online that other people have dealt with. So maybe if you have this and you know me, or you've had it and you don't know me, put it in the comments. But I haven't had anybody to talk to about this, but it's really scary with me in my situation. I'm gonna read my notes kind of on this one, because I see it in different ways in my own life. So it can start as small as zoning out. I feel like everybody does that. You zone out, you avoid a conversation that you don't want to talk about, or maybe it's not very pleasant. That's the small side of it that I see for myself. The harder scenario for me is completely not being able to respond. So I see this in different ways for myself. The first smaller end would be kind of like zoning out. I feel like everybody does that, but maybe a conversation isn't super pleasant or you don't want to talk about something, so you kind of zone out and you're not really listening, you're on autopilot. And I feel like that's pretty normal. Sometimes this goes to me creating stories in my head while somebody's talking to me. The step up from that for me is scary again. It's feeling like things aren't real. So, like, the world around me isn't real. My life isn't real. The people around me aren't real. Like, it's a dream. Not exactly like, what is it, The Matrix? It's not quite like that. It's more like I just feel like something's off. Like, it's not real life almost. So that's pretty scary when it happens for me. It normally doesn't last too long, but it's very uncomfortable to feel that way because what, you feel like your whole life is a lie? I don't know, that's scary to me. The next thing is not recognizing people that I've known for a long time. It doesn't happen very often for me. It seems like it's super random. But for example, it could be someone that I've known for years and their face just looks different all of a sudden. Like their face shape completely changes and they don't look like the person that I know. Usually I can distinguish that it's still them, but sometimes I can't, and that's really bad when that happens. And it, again, very uncomfortable. Somebody that you've known forever and they don't look like them. Sometimes I can also look up a picture of them and they look different in the picture as well, which riddle me that, I don't know, seems really weird to me. I also don't want to confuse you because when I think about it, it's kind of like, you know, when you see somebody, you've known them growing up, and so you see a picture of them 3 years ago and now they look completely different. It's not like that. It's somebody that I see very commonly. It's not like I've been apart from them for a long time. It's just someone looks completely unlike themselves. Generally, it's only for a time, like a couple days to a week. It's also happened with myself, so I don't recognize myself when I look in a mirror. And that's really scary too. It's not like I didn't put on makeup that day, so I look really different and I don't recognize myself. Again, it's like a complete face shape change and I just do not look like myself. I know that it's me because, you know, I'm moving in the mirror like, oh, that's me. This person's waving, I'm waving. But that's really confusing too. You don't know yourself when you look in a mirror, and it's really bizarre and scary. The last thing in regards to disassociation is the scariest. It doesn't happen super often, but it's not being able to come out of a zone out, as I call it. So it's the scariest to me because imagine somebody zoning out and when you say their name, they don't respond. Like, I can hear everything somebody's saying, and I just am stuck in it. Like, I'm staring at something, and I can hear everything somebody's saying, and I'm stuck. I can't respond. I can't get myself out of it. I can't move my eyes. And to me, that's really scary because I'm not in control of my body. I'm not in control in that moment. It's like I can't control my own body. I've also had situations where it's almost like I'm sleepwalking. Like I'm, again, not in control of my body. Like I've gone to places and I can't remember how I got there or what I did while I was at a location. For example, I went to a PetSmart once. I don't remember how I got there. I went in, I made purchases, I walked around, I, did this and that while I was in there. I got back to my car and I look around and I'm like, where am I? What the heck is happening? I look over, I bought 2 koi fish. What? that makes no sense. Something that I would never do, because I don't know if you know this, koi fish get like 2 feet long sometimes. So that's not something I can keep in my home. I have a small house. So it's just not being in full control of my body is really scary to me. The next symptom is bruising. It's getting better as I'm working through trauma therapy, but I'm more aware of it now and I can stop myself once I notice it happening. But I'll bruise myself, aka I kind of correlate it with disassociation because I don't realize that it's happening, but it's a form of self-harming. I am generally unaware that I'm doing it, but I've noticed if I talk about certain subjects, I start scratching myself, like on my leg. It's usually on the outside of my legs, sometimes on my shins or the inside of my legs. It's happened on my arms at times, but I keep scratching and I don't notice I'm doing it, and it's deep scratches, so it's not like, oops, I left little marks on myself, like the little red lines or like white marks that you see. I made marks on myself there. It's not like that. It's deep, and I leave bruises on myself that are like this big, and they cover the side of my leg, and that's not fun in summer times because there's massive bruises on my legs. I don't want to wear shorts when I have massive bruises on my legs. Normally now, not thick bruises like that. It's like scattered bruises on myself because I notice myself doing it. I just don't like that I do that. That's something that I've been working through with my therapist. Obviously, it's something I don't notice that I'm doing, but I've never heard of people around me that do that, so that one's, again, uncomfortable. I don't notice that I'm doing it. The next symptom is bouts of OCD. Again, I do not have clinical OCD. I get some of the symptoms at times, and it comes for chunks of time, kind of like what I talked about with the depression. It's like bouts of depression. It's kind of like bouts of OCD. I do not have OCD, and I would not wish OCD on my greatest enemy. I feel like it is such a difficult thing to deal with, and I have such a high empathy for those that do struggle with it clinically. When I do have these bouts of OCD, it is life-consuming almost. It takes over my life for a time. It's mainly for me obsessive thinking to where I cannot get away from whatever thoughts that I'm having at the time. And it's a feeling inside, a lot of times, a feeling that I need something, and if I can't get that thing, something bad's gonna happen, or I cannot move on with my life until I get that thing, or I do that thing. It's really bad when it's something expensive and it's not in the budget, because I can't do that thing, and I can't let it go, and it keeps going, and it just consumes me for quite a while. Sometimes, like I said, it's kind of like a hobby that I have to complete, or I kind of go insane. It's just something that has to be done perfectly or my world will end. And I think that my world will end, but in reality it's not going to. I'm completely restless. I can't sleep. Those times I usually can't fall asleep even if I'm on sleeping pills. Welcome back, Willow. So the next symptom is manic episodes, and this one I feel like people give it a bad rep, and mine kind of, I would say I have my negative moments, but I would say people generally don't know when I'm having a manic episode. A lot of times it is that I'm having just extreme happiness. It's like seem very joyous at the time, and I don't know, I'm just like super happy. And there's nothing that really would have led to me being super happy, but those times can lead to me not being able to stop talking. Like, I cannot stop. Even if I know that I'm annoying people because I'm talking too much, I can't stop. like, I know deep down in the back of my mind that I'm making people kind of annoyed with me, but I can't stop. It's just like this urge that I have to do. For example, I did this at dinner with my mama and papa one time. And if you know me, I'm kind of a quiet person. I don't talk a whole lot. I would rather listen to people in their lives rather than talk. But when I'm in these scenarios, I can't stop. So again, when I was with my mama and papa, I was talking, and their mouths were like literally open and like, because I don't think they had heard me talk that much in my entire life, the entire time that they'd known me, and I did it in one dinner. So I'm again, like, it's just talking super quickly, changing thoughts very erratically or very quickly, and it's more than I normally would. This also kind of goes with obsessive thinking about an activity, kind of goes back to the OCD bouts or like little sessions of OCD. Well, I can't sit still, I'm constantly moving around. Sometimes it gets really bad, I start blowing money, which is not great. Again, can't usually sleep well. I get like 2 hours of sleep max every night for about a week when it's happening. And that's not maintainable, but like, I just cannot sleep and my mind is going. Yeah, those times are pretty rough, the manic episode times. So those are my symptoms. I know it's a lot, but I really wanted you to understand what PTSD looks like for me. And I feel like it looks different for every person that has PTSD. They don't have to have all those symptoms that I listed. Maybe they have other ones or extra ones. It can be a lot at times, but also it can be just in the background and I don't notice that it's there. So I feel like it comes and goes and attacks at times that can be not great timing, or it has its ebbs and flows is what I'm trying to say. If you have PTSD, I'm interested to hear what you have to say about it and what it looks like for you. Feel free to comment it. Try not to be annoying by saying comment below. But I am nosy and I like to see how things happen for people or how it looks like in other people's lives, because it's not really a conversation people have with me. I just, again, want this to be a community where people feel free and comfortable to share what things look like for them. My tips and tricks for today: make sure, if you think that you have PTSD, to go to a licensed individual to get diagnosed. So don't self-diagnose yourself. Don't let a family member diagnose you. Don't let a friend diagnose you. Go to someone to get diagnosed. So that could be a therapist, a counselor, a psychiatrist, somebody that has been trained to diagnose those things. Another trick or tip that I think is important is a lot of insurances will actually cover your therapy sessions. So for mine, I had to find somebody that was within my realm, like they take my insurance, but I have a great therapist that takes my insurance. I have like an out-of-pocket that I have to pay until I hit my deductible. But once I hit my deductible, I don't really have to pay anything. The insurance will cover it after a while. So that's a nice thing. Out-of-pockets cost so much. Maybe you don't hit those, but at least it's like a payment that you know that you're getting. And I know that can be unaffordable sometimes, but maybe it's a conversation you can have with that therapist. Well, that's all I have for you today. Until next time, I hope that you have a wonderful day. Don't talk to strangers unless they give you candy. And I will see you next time. Bye!